you've never heard the name Pat Arnold, I loved him much, and he loved me well. He was the last missionary out of Cuba. He retired, and he lived to a ripe old age, and we had his graduation service last year. Weren't many people there because there aren't many people who remember. It was a grand and glorious time as we sat around a grave and talked about Patrick. His son told me that as he was on his deathbed, that his father came out of the coma and said, "Son, they don't need to applaud. Why are they applauding?" And his son said he thought it was the oxygen mask that he was wearing, so he removed it. His father slipped into a coma, came out the second time without the mask, and said, "Why are they applauding? They don't have to applaud." And then the last words that Pat spoke were these: "It's the bride. It's the bride. It's all about the bride." I want to talk to you this morning about the church, the bride of Christ. I would prefer, being a guy and everything, to talk about the army of God and the fight. But God has this proclivity to talk about the bride of Christ and the marriage supper of the Lamb. I've never been a bride, but I have seen a whole lot of brides. And when you're an old guy like me, you've done a whole lot of worship services. Have you ever been around a young man who's the groom, who's scared to death and you're afraid he's going to faint? I can't tell you the number of times I've said to those young men, "Son, they don't care about you. You could show up naked and nobody would even notice. If you faint, nobody's going to pay any attention." She and her mother have been preparing this for a long, long time, and you have to be here because it's not a real wedding without some kind of groom, but nobody cares about you. So calm down and be at peace. But this morning, I want to talk to you about a groom who's never nervous. A groom who's perfect. A groom who's taking us corporately and making us his bride. Now, before we talk about that, I want to give you 4 things that you need to remember about the bride of Christ. The first thing you need to know about the bride of Christ is that she's really ugly. She really is. If you read this passage in Ephesians, Paul says there's going to be a time, and that presupposes that it's not now, when the church is going to be without spot or wrinkle, without blemish. Paul said that because he looked at this bunch he was serving in Ephesus and the bunch he was serving in Corinth, and he was saying they are a weird bunch. God's choices. Let me tell you something. Augustine was right, and he understood, and you've heard it before. When Augustine said the church is a prostitute, but she's my mother.